What's up, guys? Hello, so Football Talk here, back with another NFL Week preview, as we're now in the double digits and still trying to figure out where teams stand in the food chain, because I think this year you can draw more circles with arrows between teams, how maybe one destroyed another, but they got beat by a team that lost to the original one. It's just been really hard to fixate anything. We're coming off another week with some crazy upsets of more than touchdown favorites, so over the last 11 days from when this comes out, we've now seen the Cowboys, Bills, Ravens and Bucks go down against 500 or worse teams. We also just had our first tie of the season, and some familiar powers like the Chiefs re-emerge on Sunday Night Football. By the way, I have a little bit of a sore throat, and hope I'm not sat here forever recording, but we'll just power through it. The one thing that isn't directly connected to a weekly slate or specific games, for anybody listening to this, that I wanted to bring up, please don't be one of those people that overreacts to what happens in any given game. I just had it last week when I posted my midseason picks for all the major NFL awards, which you can also find on my page, hellosofootballtalk.com, where I had people tell me Kyler Murray isn't that valuable since the Cardinals beat up on the Niners without him, then he got blown out by the Panthers, the Browns are juggernaut on offense and just needed to get rid of Odell Beckham Jr., then he got outscored 45-0 after the first possession of New England, the Cowboys were pretenders because they lost to the Broncos, then they thrashed the Falcons 43-3. It's just so up and down constantly, people crowning teams one week and they call him trash the next, also solely basing the arguments around numbers without any context. I just want to tell everybody to chill the fuck out and watch things unfold without constantly having to know everything, because I don't either. I just offer my opinions, and that's exactly what we'll spend this video on as we dive into this Week 11 slate. Once again, all betting lines are from my book on Wednesday morning, and of course subject to change. But just real quick here, we only have two teams on the bye week, one from each conference, the LA Rams and the Denver Broncos. For LA, this is a much needed break, I believe, because the Rams only lost until 2 weeks ago, came against the then undefeated Cardinals in a letdown spot following the win over the Bucks. But now they've been physically manhandled at the line of scrimmage in consecutive games, I feel like, as the Titans pass rush just put the offensive line on their asses, literally a lot of times, and then the Niners gave their defense a steady diet of the smash-mouth run game against their two high safety looks, and then attacking the middle of the field off that. Sean McVay has to get back to putting defenses in conflict by affecting their eyes and not allowing them to play as fast with so many drop-back passes, while the defense can't always give the same looks either and invite teams to take what is easily accessible. For Denver, I fear it won't be as easy to fix their problems, because they just don't have the same talent at the quarterback position and just get run over in the second half by the Eagles, who had a couple of 80-yard rushes and another one with 50, without the top running back actually. At 5-5, they are certainly still alive, but looking at the rest of the schedule, they only face one team that isn't currently above 500. And I just want to say something quickly about the Teddy Bridgewater dodge of a potential touchdown-saving tackle, where Melvin Gordon fumbled on 4th and 1 in a 7-point game, and the Broncos quarterback just let Darius Slay run right by him after dancing around initially. People tell me I'm a dick because I called it just not a natural movement for any football player, and was shocked by what I had seen, how he almost had his leg amputated and his coaches told him to not make that tackle. I get all of that, but as long as you're on the field, you're putting yourself at risk for injury, where a defender falling on his leg in the pocket or getting folded up when he decides to run presents a much higher chance of getting hurt again. He just needed to get in the damn way to trip or slow Slay down. He's not getting a pass from me for that one. But let's leave that topic behind and look ahead to what's on the menu this week. I'll run through most of these matchups rather quickly because of the size of the slate and dive into a little more detail with the standout contest for me. And the first game here, of course, Thursday Night Football, the New England Patriots at 6-4 going to Atlanta to face the 4-5 Falcons. Patriots favored by 6.5, total set at 47.5. This is a rematch of Super Bowl 51, the infamous 28-3 collapse by Atlanta, from which point on they just never been the same. Last week was the first time we've seen the Falcons get back to 500 midway through a season since the year after the appearance in a big game of 2017. Unfortunately, they followed the 3 straight W's against weak competition by getting demolished by 40 points at Dallas. The Patriots, on the other hand, have now won 4 straight by a combined 100 points, most recently outscoring the Browns 45-0 after the first drive of the game. People may not think of the Pats as an explosive offense, but they're actually number 2 behind only the Raiders with 48 plays of 20+ yards, and only the Bills have scored in a higher rate than the 47.6% of drives, as well as only 2 other teams along with them having converted more than the 47% of third downs. Mac Jones has played like a 5-year veteran, similar to what Tom Brady was early in the 2000s actually, and then the defense is number 2 in points per game at 17.7. They have the pieces in the secondary to challenge receivers in man, but also zone off and keep opposing quarterbacks off balance, will also be in top 10 in third downs and in the red zone. And I love that this has become a weekly thing. New England is now the number 1 team in the Halilso Football Talk statistic for difference in starting field position, where they're starting drives 6.2 yards further ahead than the competition. And on the other side, people wanted to jump on board with the Falcons after they got back to 500, but now they got absolutely destroyed by Dallas, and they're ahead of only the Jets, Texans and Jaguars with a negative point differential of 9.2 per game. The offense seemed to have woken up in week 9 when they scored 27 on one of the best defenses in the league in the Saints, and you really saw Matt Ryan create some plays off script actually, which we haven't seen in a while. But outside of that, in the 3 other games that they have faced top half scoring defenses, they put up a combined 22 points. Defensively, they're now the only team to yet allow a completion of 40 plus yards or more. Their pass rush, however, hasn't been good at any part of the season, but they're now clearly the worst team in that area, pressuring the quarterback on just 16.7% of the dropbacks, and that's also a big factor in them being the second worst third down group in the league. The Falcons haven't been horrible stopping the run defense, where their negative game script situations and accumulated numbers make them look a little worse than they actually are, but we just saw the pass run roughshod on the Browns team that had been one of the elite in that area, with rookie running back Ramondre Stevenson winning me my matchup in fantasy personally. Being able to limit big plays through the air is certainly valuable in this matchup for Atlanta, but Josh McDaniels has 1,000 ways to dink and dunk their way down the field, so I really have a tough time envisioning the Falcons being able to create many stops here. While when we flip things around, Falcons have just one player that can really scare New England, and that's the rookie Kyle Pitts, and you can bet your ass that Bill Belichick will have one of those 260-pound linebackers bang him off the line and use some kind of bracket coverage behind it to take him away to some degree. So now it's really up to Russell Gage and Olamide Zaccheaus to beat JC Jackson company, and I just don't see it. Given the Patriots winning this one pretty convincingly on the road, 28-17, the line has now moved from -6 to -7, and I think if it doesn't go below a touchdown, I wouldn't feel great about betting New England here, especially with the added focus for Atlanta after that embarrassing loss and hosting this game. And that brings us to the 1 p.m. slate on Sunday, starting things off with the New Orleans Saints at 5-4, going to Philadelphia to take in the 4-6 Eagles. Philly favored by 1.5, total set at 43.5. These are two of the more overachieving teams, I would call them, considering some of the questions at quarterback and the weapons around them, but they're kind of moving in opposite directions, I would say. The Saints pull off another stunning upset of the Bucs 2 weeks ago, before losing 2 straight now by exactly 2 points each, as Atlanta won on a walk-off field goal, and then the Saints failed to cash in on a 2-point conversion to tie the game late to Tennessee this past Sunday. In contrast to that, the Eagles have now won 2 of 3, thrashing the Lions, then losing on a last-second field goal themselves to the Chargers, and finally taking control in the second half at Denver, with that crucial 4th down stop and scoop and score from Darius Slay, which I already referenced. The fact that the Saints have scored 21 or more points in all but 2 of their games this season, after seeing Drew Brees retire and having a mixture of Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, and Trevor Siemian on center, isn't appreciated enough, I believe, and I think John Payton deserves a lot of credit here. That being said, this team just lacks explosive elements on offense, as their 24 plays of 20 plus yards is the fewest in the entire NFL. Defensively, they've now gained some separation to the rest of the pack, holding teams to a ridiculously low 3.1 yards per rush. That's 0.6 yards less than the next closest team. Defensive coordinator Dennis Allen also has the secondary well prepared to where you can consistently see them have a beat on their opponents and not be caught out of position. Something these two teams have in common, they're tied for the third fewest turnovers committed at only 8. And for Philly, they turn a league best 32.5% of their runs into first downs, thanks in large part to Jalen Hurts averaging 8.5 yards per scramble. And they've been really weird in that regard, because we saw them take it to the Falcons in the season opener, then they barely called up any run plays at all for a large stretch, before turning it back on recently and finding a lot of success with Miles Sanders out of the lineup. The passing game is still fairly limited, because while Jalen Hurts has delivered some big plays for the air, it's still a lot of the primary reads or get out of there stuff. Defensively, only the Bills and Cardinals have surrendered less than the 22 passes of 20 plus yards. Unfortunately, they've missed the second most tackles among NFL teams, and they've just been too predictable on that side of the ball with all the quarter stuff, allowing quarterbacks to complete a league high 74% of the passes. This is a bit of a tricky one. On paper, New Orleans should have the advantage up front on both sides of the ball, which is really different to what we've seen for the Eagles recently. However, Jalen Hurts does present more of a running and off-schedule dimension that we just won't get off Trevor Siemian, assuming that Taysom Hill doesn't start this one. And we saw this matchup play out last year when Hurts burned the Saints defense routinely but taken off against all the man coverage. With that being said, the Saints aren't a dumb team. Dennis Allen should learn from his mistakes and either use a more controlled rush or keep his eye on the Eagles quarterback, since they have a top tier corner in Marshall Lattimore that they can leave on an island with Devontae Smith, and they have the resources then to deploy that way to take away any easy yardage. If Alvin Kamara is out there, he should be a major mismatch against those field linebackers in the pass game, and if we know one thing about Siemian, he can hit those layups if you give it to them. So I gotta go with the Saints here, winning this one 23-20, and I might grab them on the money line, depending on if Kamara is available. They've been good to me recently, mostly betting on, but also a few times against them. Which has us moving on to the 3-7 Miami Dolphins at the 2-7 New York Jets. Miami favored by 3, over under set at 45 points. This is a matchup between two AFC East teams that once again are going in very different directions, even if both the seasons are of course basically over already, with 7 losses on their records. Still, Miami has now beaten the Texans in a battle between a couple of horrendous teams that hadn't won since week 1, before following that up with an impressive performance as they beat Baltimore by double digits on Thursday night. As we flip things around, we were celebrating the Jets for defeating the then number 1 seed the Bengals, after they had finally already gotten their one other win against the now AFC leading Titans, but they have now let the Colts and Bills score 45 on them respectively, and they never were really on those contests. Miami's not the only team in the bottom 3 in yards per play at 4.8 and giveaways with 18 offensively, but also in terms of yards per dropback and rush attempt. So really all around, they haven't been good in any way offensively, even if they've been a lot more effective when Tua has been on the center for them, although they're still one of the least dynamic units in the NFL when you look at explosive plays. The defense has been much more disappointing for the most part, however, where they were bottom 5 in several key categories until a couple of weeks ago, and are still almost near the bottom, allowing opponents to convert on over 45% of the third downs, and 50 plays of 20 plus yards surrendered overall. Still, they have shown a lot of improvement recently, now that their secondary is totally healthy, and they can run all the zero blitzes again effectively. For the Jets, they've now climbed their way to the mountaintop, with 22 total turnovers committed. A lot of their points recently have come when the games were out of reach, and the Bengals allowing Mike White to look like the answer quarterback for them over Zach Wilson, thanks to being able to dump it off to his backs like 20 times and allowing 34 points that day. Defensively, they allow a league-high 6.3 yards per play, and are the only team to let opponents score on over 50% of their drives against them, while the 52 plays of 20 plus yards actually puts them as the only team ahead of the Dolphins in that category. And I referenced this earlier with what has become my child to some degree in terms of the difference in starting field position. The Jets nearly break the spectrum, as they begin possessions 9.2 yards further behind their opponents, thanks to having the worst mark for their own and their opponents in the category, along with having the worst point differential at minus 15 per game. I suggest you don't watch this game if you're not a fan of either one of those teams, and probably even if you're a Jets fan, because I just don't see how you can back them in this matchup with the way these two teams have moved in recent weeks. If Gang Green were to get Zach Wilson back at quarterback, they have the firepower to challenge one of the worst deep ball defenses in the league and make this a somewhat interesting matchup, but right now it looks like they'll actually start Joe Flacco, which makes no sense really to me, but whatever. And if there ever was a matchup where Tua and company could come alive, it's this one. So I'll go with Miami here, taking this one 26-20. I've gone away from betting bad teams recently, but if this stays as a field goal, I might at least put them in a parlay on Sunday. Next up we have the 3-6 Washington football team at the 5-5 Carolina Panthers. Just over a week ago, if we had seen this matchup on the schedule, not many people would have been really interested. Washington was coming off their bye, following 4 straight losses, and set to face the Bucs, who had just had an off week themselves, but they managed to beat the reigning champs by 10, while the Panthers were coming off a pretty embarrassing 3-score loss to the Patriots themselves, when Sam Darnold threw 3 really bad picks and was later announced to be out for a good month. But then they signed Cam Newton later in the week, and he immediately brought a spark back to Carolina, as they beat up on an Arizona squad that once again was without Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins and many others, even if they had easily dealt with San Francisco the week prior. And the return of Cam is the big story here, of course, going up against his former head coach Ron Rivera, as both teams are still in the hunt for the 7th seed, even if Washington doesn't have much room for error anymore. Washington, it's kind of crazy how Taylor Heineke can lead this offense to 13 points or less in 3 straight weeks, but then they look unstoppable against the reigning Super Bowl champs coming off the bye week, including a season-long drive that took up all but half of the final 11.5 minutes of the day. They've been very streaky on that side of the ball, where Terry McLaurin can win against anybody in the whole league, but they just find a lot of different ways to not put points on the board, as they are second to last in red zone percentage. The much bigger concern has been the defense, however, which ranks 30th in percentage of drives ending in scores, and they've been by far the worst third down unit, where their 55% is 8% worse than the next closest team, and that's with Chase Young until Sunday, who will miss the rest of the season now. For Carolina, the Sam Darnold experiment has unfortunately failed. He did deliver a few big throws down the field, and was one of the most effective scrambles in all of football, but turnovers became a major problem for him once again, until he got knocked out for a good month now. And they've just been a completely different offensive unit without Christian McCaffrey out there. He's back now, and so is this other guy who announced himself to the rest of the league that way when he got into the end zone on his first snap back in Carolina. I don't know exactly what we'll get from Cam here going forward, but I'd certainly expect him to be an upgrade over what they had there at quarterback, as long as he can stay healthy. And they need it, because only the Bears have put up less than the 4.8 yards per play offensively. The defense, on the other hand, has actually become underrated, since they're now number 2 in yards per play at 4.8, third in pressure percentage around 28%, and fourth in third downs at around 33%. Their number one problem area is in the red zone, where they allow their opponents to convert 74% of those possessions into touchdowns, which is the third worst mark in the NFL. Obviously, with both teams coming off impressive victories in Week 10, the urgency to follow it up nicely should be very high on both sides, with hopes of seeing a life in the race for the final wildcard berth. If there was a nice match for Cam to get back into a groove in his first start, facing a Washington defense that is vulnerable over the middle and can't stop anybody in third downs, is probably as good as it gets. Christian McCaffrey in a few angle routes, just like the famous one that we have the clip of Cam basically telling the defender what he's gonna do, should be a nice recipe for success. For the football team's offense, not letting themselves get into third and long situations and allowing the Panthers defense to throw a bunch of different pressures their way will be key here, where Antonio Gibson's health will be an equally large factor, and he found plenty of success last week. Still, I think Carolina's offense has more playmakers on it against a very generous defense, and I think Cam can at least bring some energy to the table that I don't think Heineke can match. So give me the Panthers here winning 26-20. Unless this goes back to a field goal, I don't feel super comfortable about the side, but I will check player props once they come out and see what the line is for receiving yards for Dan Arnold here, because he's been very involved in the Panthers offense, and Washington has really struggled against the tight end position, so a bit of a DFS and betting nugget for you there. Which brings us to the 5-5 Indianapolis Colts at the 6-3 Buffalo Bills. Buffalo favored by 7, over under set at 51 points. This is one of the really sneaky good games of this Week 10 slate, I believe. Buffalo is favored by a touchdown at home, and that's probably not too far off, but these Colts have been playing very well recently, because since that 1-3 start, the only 2 games that they've lost have come in overtime to the Ravens and Titans, after having a double-digit leads at some points of those contests, scoring 23 or more points in every one of those. The Bills have been more up and down, I would say, since the dominant 4-1 start, losing on that failed Josh Allen sneak at Tennessee before the bye week, then really not turning it on against the Dolphins until the fourth quarter, losing a 9-6 poop fest at Jacksonville, before finally waking up this past Sunday and destroying the Jets 45-17, when we finally saw Josh Allen look like an MVP candidate once again. For Indianapolis offensively, they are tied for the second highest yards per rush attempt at 5.1, as Jonathan Taylor has emerged as one of the most explosive big play threats in the entire league at any position, leading the pack with 1,240 scrimmage yards and averaging 6.5 yards per touch, which is second only to Cordell Patterson among players with more carries than receptions. The defense is vulnerable on the back end, especially with some of the injuries that they've dealt with, but the pass rush has picked up recently, and they've been able to get some extra possessions for the offense, as they are the only unit that have recorded at least one takeaway in every single game this season, which is why they're number 2 behind only the Bills, actually, with the turnover differential of plus 11. For Buffalo, the stats can certainly lie, and the Bills' defense has set up Josh Allen company in scoring positions a lot of times, but the 31.1 points per game are the second most in the league, behind only the Cowboys, and they're just half a percentage point away from scoring half of the possessions, which is also number 1 in the league, as well as ranking only behind the Chiefs in third on efficiency. And then of course the defense ranks first in points per game at only 15, yards per play at 4.6, and third down as the only one under 30%, along with several other categories and advanced numbers like DVOA. All of that leads to them being 47 points better than the next closest team with the point differential of plus 145, and 3 better than the second closest team, which is Indy that I just mentioned, with the turnover differential of plus 14. There's been some head-scratching moments, but that's a reason that they are currently the betting favorite to win it all. If the sportsbook like several of Buffalo's statistics and have been right of putting big numbers on them in some spots, I think this one here is a little bit off, because Indy has been a top 10 team since week 4 and shouldn't lay a touchdown to really anybody. I believe with how balanced they've been offensively, Carson Wentz doing a much better job of protecting the ball, and the defense capable of punishing questionable decisions, they might be able to steal off from Josh Allen, and we could see a home run call from Jonathan Taylor like we seemingly do every week. However, I don't think Indy's defense can really match up with those weapons that the Bills bring to the table, as long as they don't allow themselves to become super predictable, which we saw them get more on the center, let Allen use those sleight of hand fakes, and actually have the heads of defenders on a swivel. So I think they'll win it, but 28-23 seems to be much more appropriate than actually making this a full touchdown difference. So Indy is really the only way they can go here from a betting perspective, I believe, even if I'm not super in love with fading Buffalo, because the highs we've seen from them have been exceptional. That brings us to the lone winless team in the Detroit Lions, traveling to Cleveland to take on the 5-5 Browns. Cleveland favored by 10 here, total set at 45.5. Detroit was generous enough to provide a first tie of the season this past Sunday, in combination with the Mason Rudolph-led Steelers, as they scored a combined 3 points over the fourth quarter and a full overtime period. It was not pretty in any way, and neither was the Lions' 44-6 defeat at home to the Eagles before they went on a bye week. They've shown a lot of fight for most of the season and had a chance to finally get that first W on a more than makeable field goal late, but I'm just wondering how much longer those players can really put it all out there if they don't see results. But hey, since the tie basically counts as half a win, this 2021 version won't go down as the worst team ever for the Lions. The Browns, on the other hand, were projected to be far off that, with aspiration of beating the Ravens for the AFC North and be one of the true contenders in the AFC overall, which it looked like to me early on that they could be, but their offense has just been sputtering on too many occasions. Last week everybody was like, Baker finally doesn't have to force Odell anymore and blah blah blah. I get he's banged up and it gets worse by the week it seems like, but that was a pathetic showing against the Patriots, and if they can't run the ball effectively and stay ahead of the change, they seem to be toast. For Detroit, the 5.2 yards they gain on average every time Jared Goff drops back is better than only the Bears, who have surrendered more sacks than any other team in the league, and he ranks 30th in expected points added by play individually. As we flip things around for the Lions, they've surrendered an NFL worst 7.7 yards per dropback defensively. That's the same number as the number 1 net passing offense in the Cowboys averages right now, so it's basically as if the Lions face Dak Prescott and company every single week. What has allowed them to stay in most games is the combination of the dynamic in-space DeAndre Swift and more of the bang and Jamal Williams, who average 4.8 yards per touch as a running back duo, while the defense is at least average in yards per attempt on the ground defensively. For Cleveland, they still average a league best 5.3 yards per rush, despite not having Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt out there for about half the season, the offensive line at least being banged up at times, but all of a sudden they're also tied for the second most sacks allowed at 30, and Baker's own coaching staff is looking to take the ball out of his hands. As we switch things around to the defensive side of the ball for Cleveland, the 3.8 yards given up per rush attempt is the third lowest number in the NFL, even after getting gashed on the ground up in New England. They're tied for first with 29 sacks on the year themselves. I personally had Myles Garrett as my mid-season choice for Defensive Player of the Year, and I've been a fan of their investments in the back seven, although Joe Watt's defensive looks have been very predictable. I think on a personal basis, the Lions won't just bow down and let the Browns' rushing attack gash them throughout the day. They have enough beef up front so not let ball carriers get through the second level on too many occasions. But if Ken Stefanski does enough of that to force the linebackers to not being able to fast flow, with Nick Chubb probably out there, they can break a couple of long ones late. And this seems to be a bounce back spot for them as a team, with the feeling around the Lions that's kind of tough to judge right now. I lean more towards being deflated than happy about not having lost on paper, because that game was there to be had. Baker and his receivers may not have the firepower to punish Detroit's split defensive backfields, but it should be enough to keep those guys off balance as a unit, maybe with Donovan Peoples-Jones striking deep once more. So given the Browns winning this one 27-17, added the 10-point spread, with Baker Mayfield being even more banged up now, I don't see him trying to really light things up, but rather get back to their roots, which is running the ball, getting easy yak opportunities off play action, and sprinkling in some screenplays. Which has us moving on to the 4-5 San Francisco 49ers, going to Jacksonville to take on the 2-7 Jags. The visitors are favored by 6 here, and the total is set at 45.5. A lot of people are ready to ride off the Niners, and I was pretty disappointed myself by a lackluster showing against the Cardinals, who were missing several key starters, but then he came back this past week and dominated the Rams 31-10 at home on Monday night. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle between those two performances, because they still have a very talented team, but I don't think they have a true difference-maker quarterback, and they rely on a lot of rookies at cornerback. The Jaguars obviously have had one of those lows this season, highlighted by a 31-7 beatdown in Seattle following the bye week, before turning back around and beating the Bills 9-6. And then when it looked like the Colts would blow them out this past Sunday, they fought their way back into it and had a chance to put together a game-winning drive at the end. For San Francisco, I was very surprised to learn that only 3 teams have averaged more net yards per dropback in the entire league than them. They're also by far the best red zone offense in the NFL, cashing in for 6 on just under 80% of their possessions down there. Deebo Samuel just had another monster game against the Rams, with a couple of trips to the end zone, and he's one of the most underappreciated players in all of football, ranking behind only Cooper Kupp in receiving yards, and number 1 yards per touch among guys with at least 50 opportunities. While the return of George Kittle as a block and receiver is certainly felt, and Football Outsiders has them as the number 3 attack in DVOA. Defense has actually been the issue more so, but they allow quarterbacks to complete 68% of their throws against them, and a passer rating just below 100, while only Jacksonville has forced fewer than the 7 turnovers. And since I just mentioned them, only the Texans have scored less than the Jaguars 149 points through 9 games, and they're converting a league low 30.3% of their third downs. They've been able to avoid turnovers better as the season has progressed, but by being dead last with only 5 forced themselves, they're only ahead of the Jets at -10 in that department now. They've actually stopped the run pretty effectively until Jonathan Taylor seemingly carved through them like a hot knife through butter in the first half at least, but they pretty much bottomed them across the board outside of that. So most certainly showed improvement and more fight as a team as of late. This feels like San Francisco starting to re-emerge now that they have pretty much all of the key contributors back on the field and gone back to more of their identity. Kyle Shanahan seems pissed off about all the negative comments coming their way recently, and with new energy after the huge win, with the sights set in the 7th seed that seems to be wide open right now in the NFC, I think the Jaguars will be victims of that. While it would take Trevor Lawrence to beat their rookie corners with great throws down the sideline and some key runs sprinkled in, which I think Fred Warner can take away, I got the Niners staying in form and taking control of this one, 30-17. Really not that much to say. I just think they're a much better team in terms of the talent, the roster, and the coaching staff. And we'll stay in the AFC South, because we have the 1-8 Houston Texans going to Tennessee to take on the 8-2 Titans. Tennessee favored by 10, total set at 44.5. Alright, here we have what looks like a major mismatch between those two division foes, because we may have the hottest and the coldest teams in the entire league facing off against each other. The Texans have now lost 8 straight since the Week 1 win over the just discussed Jaguars, while the Titans are riding a 6-game winning streak, including 5 teams at or above the 500 mark. Houston has been consistently getting worse throughout the year, I feel like, most recently losing the battle between 1-win teams against the Dolphins before going on their bye week. The Titans lost Superman Derrick Henry a couple of weeks ago, but that didn't stop them from beating up on the Rams as such on underdogs on Sunday Night Football, and then sneaking out a win thanks to stopping a potential game-tying 2-point conversion by the Saints this past Sunday. As we look at Houston, on offense, they're scoring just 14.2 points per game, and they've scored 21 total points less than the next closest team, which is Jacksonville. Really, since the season opener, their run game has not been effective at all, still ranking at the bottom of the league with just 3.3 yards per carry, although getting Darrell Taylor back and some of the scrambles that he can bring to the table may help in that regard. The defense has actually not been absolutely horrible, I would say, despite one of the weakest units at all 3 levels league-wide when you look at it on paper. The turnover stats are certainly inflated by getting 5 of Miami the last time out, but I think a lot of the bad numbers can be brought back to opponents being set up with great positions, as those guys basically start at their own 30 on average. While for Tennessee, like I said, this team has been on fire, but I'm still not totally sure about the offense. They are bottom 5 in explosive pass plays with only 24, and since Derrick Henry got hurt 2 weeks ago, they've averaged a minuscule 2.3 yards per carry. Recently it's been the defense saving the day and getting the ball back in plus territory or actually scoring themselves. The one thing that they've been great at is drawing flags to extend drives, as they've been awarded a league-high 24 first downs by a penalty. The one that puts them over the top was absolutely garbage, as the Saints had an end-zone interception taken off the board by one of the worst roughing the passer calls that I've ever seen. However, on the opposite end of the spectrum, they've given their opponents a league-high 715 free yards and penalties themselves, and the defense has surrendered the 5th most pass plays of 20 plus yards at 38. So there's certainly some question marks still about the secondary, even if they have been progressing. But man, have they turned that pass rush around. In those 5 consecutive wins over 500 teams or better, they've recorded 19 total sacks and completely owned the line of scrimmage against the Chiefs and Rams. Last time I said that there was a major mismatch against an AFC South team, the Bills actually get upset by 2 touchdown underdogs in the Jaguars, but I don't envision this happening again. Tyrod could challenge this Titans secondary to some degree, and if they're smart, they won't let him hold on to the ball. But with the way that Tennessee can cloud the picture pre-snap, and Kevin Byard being one of the most free-flowing instinctual safeties in all of football, pair with Tyrod's habit of taking his eyes down in the rush if he doesn't like what he sees, I think we'll see quite a few more sacks, and the Texans being in long yardage situations, which won't really be an effective recipe for them. So I gotta ride with the hot hand here some more. 27-16 Titans. The offense hasn't been explosive enough for me to back them at that number, but the Texans will need some crazy trick plays that they came up with during the bye week to actually throw a curveball here and make this interesting. And we'll stay with the theme of divisional games, as next up with the 8-2 Green Bay Packers going to Minnesota to take on the 4-5 Vikings. Green Bay favored by 2.5, total set at 49 points. And while this matchup features another 8-2 team, at least this one faces a 4-5 squad to challenge them to some degree inside the NFC North. Winning 9 since the head-scratching blow loss to the Saints in Week 1, with the only defeat coming in the one game without Aaron Rodgers at the helm at Kansas City. And while Rodgers has either been not available or not been totally on his game these last 2 weeks, the defense has really stepped up, holding the Chiefs to 13 points and then shutting out the Seahawks most recently. The Vikings, on the other hand, remain a conundrum for me. They're actually a +10 in point differential and +6 in the turnover department. Every one of their games has been decided by 3 or less, other than the 4-point loss to Dallas without Dak Prescott, and just now a 7-point win against the Chargers. They have the ability to be a wildcard team on paper, even if some of the issues of defense are really apparent, but they just always try to play their games close instead of seeking separation to their opponents when they get a chance to actually win those games. We'll start with Green Bay here, because for the first time since maybe the 2010 Super Bowl season, the Packers may be better on defense than they are on offense, and they're still pretty darn good with Aaron Rodgers on the center on that side of the ball as well. The defense has now given up just 34 combined points to Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, and Russell Wilson over the last 2 weeks, and their 18 points per contest overall is the 3rd best number in the entire league. Offensively, they're actually slightly above average in run play percentage, where that combination of the burst from Aaron Jones and the power of the sledgehammer and AJ Dillon complement each other very well, and we'll get to see a lot more of the latter one now that Jones is expected to miss a couple of weeks. They marry the plays together extremely well. Matt LaFleur seems to consistently be a step ahead of the defense, and then of course they still got arguably the best receiver in all of football in Devontae Adams, whose chemistry with the quarterback is just impeccable. When you go for the numbers, you can find things on either end of the spectrum for Kirk Cousins, because he's being pressured at one of the highest rates in the entire league at 28%, but he's gotten sacked less than any other quarterback in the game. Yet, then only Mike White throws the ball more than his 2.8 yards short of the sticks on average, and he just doesn't deliver a ton of big-time throws. Overall, the Vikings are tied for a league low with 6 turnovers committed, and they're actually the best 4th down team in the entire league at just under 73%. Defensively, however, only the Chargers and Cardinals have surrendered more than the 4.7 yards per carry. They are tied for an NFL best 29 sacks, which is surprising considering Danielle Hunter was lost for the rest of the year a couple of weeks ago, but that's bound to regress to some degree now, and I would argue the corners are still highly vulnerable. Jones is significant in this one because Minnesota expects a lot from the linebackers, and they have Eric Hendricks sink underneath a lot of deep crossers, which he got an amazing pick of last week against the Chargers actually, and that would open up room underneath for the back, which really isn't Dillon's game. So I'm interested to watch if we see more of one of my favorite running back prospects last April in Callum Hill. Either way, with the development that I've seen out of the Packers as an all-around team, it's tough for me to not keep riding them here. The Vikings have had the issues facing balanced offenses, where those guys on the outside will be one-on-one primarily, and Devontae Adams becomes a major mismatch. Defensively, the attitude that they've shown up front, setting the tone of first contact, and creating pressure in passing situations, as well as having the speed in the secondary to knock at burning posts and deep in-breaking routes, as those safeties can feel comfortable triggering down into our shells. Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen won't be allowed to take over this game. The Vikings are a weird team, and they've given Green Bay some good fights in the past, but I'll have to go with the Pack here, taking this one 24-21. That would put us 4 points below the total, but I wouldn't feel too comfortable betting against Aaron Rodgers, putting up 30 on a defense that I still have questions about. And that brings us to the final matchup of the 1 p.m. slate, where we have another NFC North team in the 3-6 Chicago Bears playing host to the 6-3 Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore favored by 6, over under set at 45 points. We got a Baltimore team coming off one of the most head-scratching losses of the season at Miami against the Chicago squad, who had just had a week off after they felt they were screwed by the refs in a 2-point loss at Pittsburgh. The home team's currently on a 4-game losing streak and basically on the brink of elimination, but they must feel good as an organization about the development of the dynamic rookie quarterback Justin Fields, even if his current head coach might not be there to reap the benefits next season. The Ravens on paper, I'd certainly argue, are still a better team, and Lamar Jackson right now is just a much better version of Fields basically. But a Chicago team with a week off and pissed from their last time out, playing host in the Windy City, can be dangerous, even if the Ravens are coming off a mini bye themselves. Baltimore's not back to being tied for the most rushing yards per game, but Lamar Jackson is contributing 46% of those. We've seen Lamar grow as a progression passer, but the Ravens still lack answers in the dropback game in too many occasions, especially when getting to 3rd and long, which shows in them converting just 34% of their attempts overall, which is the 4th lowest mark in the league. And it wasn't full display against Miami, not being able to ever adapt to all the blitz zero stuff that they throw their way, which they must have known coming into the matchup. That's what they're going to get. The defense is tied with the Chiefs for the second highest yards per play at 6.2, behind only the Jets, and only the Jaguars have forced less than the 7 turnovers. They're the best red zone and the second best third down defense, however, while pressuring the quarterback on a league-high 28.8% of dropbacks, but they do so while blitzing at the 3rd highest rate and getting burned a few times along the way, with 40 passes of 20 plus yards allowed, which is the 3rd most in the league, and they've given up 50 more yards after the catch than the next closest team. For Chicago, their 4.7 yards per play on offense is dead last in the entire NFL, and they average nearly half a yard less than the next closest team on a per dropback basis. Plus, they've allowed a league-high 33 sacks, even if Justin Fields holding onto the ball is certainly a factor in that. However, the rookie quarterback has also provided some sparks, with elusive scrambles on big plays, and only trails Lamar Jackson with 10 intended air yards per attempt. Defensively, the total sack numbers and a couple of other things may look great, but they're pretty much average or below across the board in the stats that really matter, surrendering points on the 4th highest rate of the drives league-wide at nearly 46%, and not having cracked double digits for takeaways yet. Justin Fields has been oblivious to the blitz to some degree, and I'm willing to bet Wink Martindale will come after him on Sunday, but there's a chance that he will burn them from some big gains on scrambles and connect with Darnell Mooney off some kind of double move if they get one of those young DBs for Baltimore to bite on the initial break. And with how much they rely on the run game, Chicago won't be behind the script constantly either. And the Ravens offense will face a stark contrast in defense, going from the all-out blitzes from Miami to Sean Desai's split safety-oriented coverages and more so fall-down rushes, so the middle of the field will be accessible. However, the one piece Chicago has on their side to make things difficult for Baltimore is Roquan Smith, who is one of the best coverage linebackers against tight ends to limit the damage that Mark Andrews can deal to them, and tracking Lamar is sort of a spy if he doesn't have direct coverage responsibilities. Still, I believe we'll see a breakout game from rookie wide receiver Rashad Bateman, who's looked pretty darn good since joining the Ravens, and maybe also Hollywood Brown. I think the Ravens win this one by a touchdown, 27-20, but I don't feel great about it. They've just played so many close games recently, and Chicago has been feisty, with the young single calls never give up mentality. Which has us moving on to the midday window, where we have one 4-5 kickoff between two 5-4 teams, with the Cincinnati Bengals visiting the Las Vegas Raiders. Favored by a point, total set at 49. Similar to a couple of other sneaky good games in the 1 p.m. window, I think this one has a chance to be very entertaining. Both of these teams are coming off of pretty embarrassing losses to division rivals in the Browns and Chiefs respectively. Cincy at least had a week off to work through some of the issues, but that second half rout of the Ravens seems forever ago now, with losses to the lowly Jets and Cleveland over the last 2 games, when they've turned the ball over 4 times and the defense has allowed 75 combined points to 2 underwhelming offenses, I would say. The Raiders haven't won a game in nearly a month either, with the bye being followed by a couple of losses to the Giants, and then a major letdown in what seemed to be an exciting Sunday Night Football shootout against the Chiefs on NBC's Sunday Night Paper. Certainly not what they expected after the 5-2 start. Cincinnati has been one of the most explosive passing offenses in the league. Only the Cowboys average more than a 7.6 yards every time they drop back. Joe Burrow's 82.7% rate of on-target throws is the highest mark in the NFL behind only Kyler Murray, according to Pro Football Reference, and thanks to that, as well as the talent among the skill position players, he's also second with 6.3 yards after the catch on average. Defensively, the additions that they made up front this past offseason have really paid off, as they are not top 10 in rushing defense per attempt at 4.2, and their 51 tackles for loss rank 3rd league-wide, as well as being 8th in total pressures. They are pretty conservative on that side of the ball, thanks to being secure tackles for the most part, but it's also gone to the extreme at times against the Jets, for example, who scored 34 points despite rarely throwing the ball further than a couple of yards beyond the line of scrimmage. One thing that they certainly have going for themselves is the fact that they've surrendered a league low 38 yards via penalty per game this season. Las Vegas, Derek Carr leads the league with 47 passes of 20 plus yards, and the Raiders are second overall in passing yards per game. However, they've become very one-dimensional as a bottom 5 rushing team based on total and average yards per carry, and the loss of Henry Ruggs, as horrible as that whole situation is in general, has made an impact on the field as well, of course, where they are now relying on 34-year-old, out-of-glass built Deshaun Jackson to fulfill that role. The defense has been a pleasant surprise here, as they're top 5 in yards allowed per dropback, thanks in part to holding receivers to a league-low 724 yards after the catch. Max Crosby has been a fringe defensive player of the year candidate, and they've gotten solid play from a few rookies on the back end, but they're also below average in all scoring metrics and allow 3/4 of red zone possessions to be converted into touchdowns against them. So this should really be a fun matchup, and I'll be peeking at my second screen quite a bit, since there's an even better game that my main focus should go to, of course, which I'll get to in a little bit here. Both of these teams can strike through the air, and the defense play top down to take away all the shots from the other side. The defensive line have taken big steps forward on either side here, and there's a lot of factors speaking for a highly competitive matchup. However, the two areas that I would clearly give the advantage to the Bengals here, they have given up nearly 30 yards less via penalty on a game-by-game basis, and I've at least seen the Bengals dominate the line of scrimmage and run the ball effectively in spots, like that second half against the Ravens. So I think they'll be the ones here to get back on track. 26-24 Bengals. I may bet them on the money line, but it's not one that I'll run to the window with, because I could really see this going either way. Which brings us to the two 4:25 kickoffs, where first we have the 8-2 Arizona Cardinals at the 3-6 Seattle Seahawks. Arizona favored by 2.5, total set at 50 points. We have two more teams coming off lackluster performances, losing by 3 scores each. The Cardinals were the last undefeated team we had in the league, and while a game-ending interception in the end zone against the Packers ended the undefeated campaign, their most impressive performance as a team might have come the week after, when they beat up on the 49ers without Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, Chase Edmonds, J.J. Watt, and many others. Unfortunately, the magic ended quickly, as they were never in that game against the Panthers without their star quarterback in wideout again. The Seahawks on the flip side have only won one of the last 5 games, when they destroyed the Jaguars at home out of nowhere. Not having Russell Wilson for the majority of those certainly hurt, but he was off target all day against the Packers and got shut out for the first time in his career this past Sunday. One of these groups would certainly be more desperate, considering how little room for error Seattle has here, but Arizona of Kyler Murray, like the back and the center, should be bound for a bounce back themselves. And let's just slow things a little bit down here with the Cardinals. They are still top 3 in point differential at 9.8 plus, and plus 8 in the turnover department respectively on the season. Kyler Murray remains the most accurate passer in the NFL with 2 weeks off, according to Pro Football Reference, as 84% of his passes have been graded on target, and while James Conner has been excellent in his absence, there's a reason Chase Edmonds is averaging 5.7 yards per carry. Arizona's defense is tied with the Chargers for a league-high 4.8 yards allowed per rush, which has been the one Achilles heel, but they're tied with the Bills for the fewest explosive plays surrendered at only 22. They take the ball away at the 3rd highest rate, and also find themselves in that spot for percentage of drives ending in points. They've been banged up, but this is still a very capable unit under Vance Joseph. With Seattle on the other hand, there's not been a ton of positives to take away for them recently. One of them is that they're tied for a league low 6 giveaways. Sure, not having Russell Wilson for a few games makes an impact here, but unfortunately only Jacksonville and Detroit are converting a lower rate of their 3rd downs, at just over a third of those attempts. The 49ers are the only other team to score touchdowns on more than 70% of the red zone drives, but once again only 2 teams have been able to get there on fewer occasions, and the Seahawks average the fewest plays per possession overall. They just aren't a very efficient offense, and teams are making them work their way down the field. Defensively, they've been, I would say, stopping the run and keeping teams out of the end zone fairly effectively, but their big addition, Jamal Adams, is someone that they're hiding in coverage more so, and their best corner might be rookie Trey Brown, who I liked a lot, but didn't expect to have that role this early. Russ had a real off against the Packers, and it's just tough to judge how much that finger will continue to bother him. What I do know is that the more he has to throw it, the bigger the impact of not being precise on the short and intermediate level will hurt, since they're already not great anyway when they're forced to string together longer drives. If Chris Carson does find his way back into the field, that would certainly be a plus, but Vance Joseph has done a very good job against fairly predictable offenses. I'm going to make my pick here based on the assumption that Kyle is back in the lineup, even if he's banged up a little bit. And I say the Cardinals win this one 24-20, because Seattle can't really offensively unless Russ is back on his game. But with the unclarity at quarterback for both teams, I'll lay off this one in terms of betting, especially since going against a desperate Hawks team at home isn't a great recipe for success, I think. And that brings us to the game of the week, where we have the 7-2 Dallas Cowboys at the 6-4 Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City favored by 2, and we have the highest over-under of the week at 56 points. We got two division leaders coming off dominant performances against the Falcons and Raiders respectively. The Cowboys certainly had an off day against the Broncos a couple of weeks ago when they were down 30-0 heading into the fourth quarter. However, I thought that was more an aberration than the norm, as they just failed to make plays when the opportunities were there for them, and Dak had a very uncommon game for himself. The Chiefs, on the other hand, have now won 3 straight and gone from last back to first inside the AFC West, but they barely beat the Giants at home, let the Packers get within a touchdown, despite the offense with Jordan Love being completely out of sync, before they put on a great show against the Raiders on Sunday Night Football. Dallas is now the number 1 offense in points per game at 31.6, and yards per play at 6.3, and I would argue that they are the most balanced in all of football, because they have a two-headed monster in the backfield. Now with Michael Gallup back in the lineup, you have CeeDee Lamb going back to the slot, and if they do bracket him there, Amari Cooper can roast corners one-on-one with impeccable route running. Tyron Smith is now expected to be back at left tackle, which moves Brandon Knight back to the right side, where he's been much more comfortable. And then of course Dak has been a fringe MVP candidate outside of that one game against Denver. The big difference for Dallas this season, however, has been the defense, which quietly ranks 10th in points per game, 3rd in third down percentage, and 4th for 17 takeaways, which Javon Diggs contributed half of. They complement that offense extremely well, and they've stepped up when needed. On the other hand, Kansas City is finally back to only being second to last in turnovers committed with 20, as the Jets are coming in hot, and they've only had 1 combined over the last 2 weeks. They have been the best third down offense all along, still as the only team to cross the 50% mark, and doing so by over 3%, bound to get running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire back, and using the backs and tight ends more in the pass game overall. Chiefs defense still is tied for the second most yards per play surrendered at 6.2, but they've been really solid with bringing guys to the turf recently, and are now number 1 with only 40 missed tackles on the year, where rookie linebacker Nick Bolton is certainly a major factor in the middle for them. Now that they have Melvin Ingram on the edge, and have moved Chris Jones back to his more natural spot in the interior, we've seen more flashes from that front in general. They don't have to be great on that side of the ball, but just take the ball away a few times, and make offenses play backhanded against them a little bit, but limiting what they do best. With the total set at 56 points, you know there's going to be fireworks in this one. As long as Mahomes can stay patient and content with moving the ball methodically down the field, without giving Diggs the chance to jump a route, they should be able to stay on schedule for the most part, and then some opportunities for big plays may arise later. Unfortunately, I don't see the Chiefs defense really being able to slow down the Cowboys either. They've had success recently when Steve Spagnuolo has been able to plan specifically for their opponents, whether it's making Jordan Love prove that he can defeat the blitz, or deploying most of their resources and coverage against the Raiders, because they want to force them to show that they can run the ball on them. That's just not going to happen in this one, because Dallas doesn't have that one strength or weakness that you can really attack, and that's why I believe that they can control the pace and the outcome of this game more so than the Chiefs, who have a few obvious deficiencies. Unless Mike McCarthy makes some terrible game or clock management decisions to take away from what his coordinators are doing, I like the Cowboys here, winning 28-25 at Arrowhead. I'll see what this moves throughout the week, and might bet the Cowboys on the money line here, because I just think they're a more complete team. Yet, with how murky the AFC is, past the Titans and the Bills, could this be a Super Bowl preview? Move to Sunday Night Football, where we have the 5-3-1 Steelers, since we obviously had that one tie, at the LA Chargers at 5-4. Home team favored by 5 points, over under set at 47. If you had told me a month into the season that the 1-3 Steelers, whose offense looked completely anemic, would come in here half a game up on the Chargers, who set that 3-1 on top of the division, I would probably say you're crazy. Now, you look at some of the wins for Pittsburgh. They barely sneaked by the Geno Smith Seahawks on a field goal in overtime. A couple of calls by the refs kept the Bears from kicking a potential game-winning field goal, and they were the first ones to not beat the Lions, even if they didn't lose themselves either. For LA, we fell in love with some of the things that they did early in the season, going for it in fourth downs, in atypical situations, allowing teams to take the easy yardage on short runs and passes, in favor of keeping those safeties deep and stuff like that. Well, now they failed to convert in those crucial downs, and teams have been gashing them on the ground. with some of the looks that they've shown on defense simply not being able to stop the offense from picking up positive plays in terms of gaining more than what is necessary on any given down. So Pittsburgh may be overachieving, and the Chargers haven't lived up to their potential over the last month. Offensively, there's really not so many positives to bring up with the Steelers. The top 3 rookies have done their job, as Najee Harris has faced a lot of stacked boxes and unfavorable looks even when catching the ball in checkdowns, where the defense is right there and he just has to make something happen. Pat Freiermuth has lived up to his late first round grade that I had on him as a tight end, and Kendrick Green has been a solid starter in the interior of the offensive line, but Big Ben's inability to challenge defenses past the first down marker, with the third lowest rate of intended air yards per attempt, combined with a rushing attack that averages just 3.8 yards per carry, it doesn't match well. Defensively, they're number 6 on third down, pressure the quarterback on the 4th highest rate, and are the number 3 red zone defense. However, you see Detroit be able to run the ball on them with 229 yards on Sunday, and their 11 runs of 20 plus yards surrendered on the season are 3 more than any other team. Speaking of issues stopping the run, the Chargers are tied with the Cardinals for a league high 4.8 yards allowed per rush, and they've also missed the most tackles at 76, while also being 30th in third down percentage at 46%. They've been able to take away deep balls effectively, thanks to the nature of how the defense is structured, but they've outsmarted themselves at times with some of the disadvantages from a run-fit perspective in favor of stopping the downfield passing game. Offensively, I feel like they've become more static as the season has progressed, where Justin Herbert isn't allowed to test the intermediate areas of the field, and they've gone from number 4 in EPA offensively through 5 weeks to 19th since then, while Mike Williams has gone from a superstar early on to an underutilized weapon downfield. I just want to see them open things up again. Once more, if you had asked me a good month ago who will win this matchup, I would have probably taken the Chargers by at least a touchdown, but they've been too much in their own way, and the Steelers have just done what's needed to sneak by their opponents. If they play through Najee and their rookie tight end, I think they can move the ball enough to put some points on the board and rely on the defense, which has had a lot of success against those heavy dropback attacks. So it'll be up to the Chargers to establish more balance offensively, make Austin Eckler a big piece in both facets of the game, and test the defense further down the field if they want to take control of the pace of this game. I believe Chase Claypool not being out there for Pittsburgh is a big loss, because his size at the catch point and ability to draw flags could at least allow Roethlisberger to throw a couple of balls up there and have that guy make plays for him to back up those safeties a little bit more. So without that element and the potential I see in this Chargers team, which will have to slide protection to the struggling right tackle Storm Norton, since rookie Rashawn Slater on the other end has played phenomenally well, I got to go with the home team here, giving the Chargers winning 26-20. Nothing I could really advise you to do here from a betting perspective, unless Mason Rudolph starts again, because he somehow even makes Big Ben look like a capable quarterback. Which brings us to the final game of the week, Monday Night Football, the 3-6 New York Giants at the 6-3 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bucks were up by 11 here, total set at 49.5. Here we got a rematch of one of the more surprisingly entertaining games from last season, when the Giants were a 2-point conversion away, where there could have easily been a pass interference call on, from going to overtime against the Bucks. Big Blue has had 2 really bad games against the Cowboys and Rams, arguably 2 of the top 5 or so teams. Other than that, they've had chances to win every single week, but have not been able to make the key plays, whether it's jumping offside and allowing a second chance on a game-winning field goal, dropping a game-sealing pick in the end zone, or not being able to put together a 3-minute drill to tie the score at Kansas City. But their 3 wins all came against teams at or above the 500 mark. Opposed to that, Tampa Bay came up blazing hot with a 6-1 start, where their only loss came to the Rams, but then they were upset once again by the Saints, where Brady actually threw a pick 6 with a chance to tie or even win on the final drive. And then when they were expected to blow out Washington as double-digit favorites coming off the bye week, they shockingly lost by that margin, with the defense completely unable to create any stops. The Giants have just been so banged up on the offensive side of the ball, as every one of the starters, outside of a couple of offensive linemen, have missed games this season. Daniel Jones has had some pretty good moments, and he's actually been let down at times by his teammates. Not having Saquon Barkley out there for most of the season has certainly robbed them a dynamic element out of the backfield, and they are the worst red zone offense in the entire league, converting for 6 on just 44% of their possessions inside the opposing 20. Defensively, they bounced back after being very generous to opposing offenses early on, opposed to what I believed we could see from them coming into the year. Still, only the Falcons pressure the quarterback on a lower percentage of dropbacks, and they've allowed too much free access to receivers. The 2 key guys on that side of the ball for them are the 2 highest picks of the last 2 drafts, in safety Xavier McKinney and edge rusher Azeez Ojulari, who have both been coming on strong. The Bucks yards per play and points per game offensively, as well as surrendering sacks on a league low 3% of dropbacks, which altogether leads to them being easily the number one team in offensive DVOA, according to Football Outsiders. Tom Brady is among the top 5 MVP candidates or so, but just like I argued with some people last week, he doesn't bring the type of out-of-structure stuff that some of those youngsters will have in the league, and we saw Washington force him to dump it off underneath, which does not coincide with the way that they want to attack the field vertically. As we flip things around, the Bucs still have the number 2 rush defense in terms of per carry numbers, but we've seen some cracks in that armor, especially in must-have situations against the football team last week, and Todd Bowles needs to realize what kind of names he has out there cornerback right now, and not ask those dudes to cover Terry McLaurin man-to-man in order to send another blitz. It's rare to see Brady struggle in back-to-back games, and this will actually make it 3 in a row, even if the last one was more on the defense than him, and I still don't get how one of those picks wasn't ruled a fumble instead. Giants defensive coordinator Patrick Graham did give him some trouble a year ago, with all the different looks on the back end and the delayed games up front, to put pressure on the 44-year-old. Not having Gronk out there absolutely hurts them in that regard, in terms of dicing up zone coverage, and Big Blue has plenty of beef up front to make the Bucs one-dimensional. So I don't think this will be a rout, and if Tampa Bay continues to put the makeshift defensive backs in one-on-one against some talented receivers for the Giants, that spells trouble to me, especially with Danny Dimes having the legs to pick up big yardage if he gets out there. This game being in Tampa Bay and Brady being really pissed off about how everything has gone down recently, I'll have to go with the Bucs here, winning 28-20, but that 11 points is a lot. Maybe they get a late touchdown to put it away, but assuming Saquon is back in the lineup this week and the Giants don't kill themselves, with the growth Daniel Jones has shown, I don't see this being a blowout. And that wraps up the 11 preview. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share it with a couple of friends to get them ready for week 11. This certainly came out longer than I hoped for, and I appreciate everybody who took the time to listen to the whole thing. I tried to throw in some betting nuggets and interesting numbers, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm not totally sure what I'll do next week with Thanksgiving on the horizon. Maybe something a little more off schedule, where I talk about a specific topic or team that comes to my mind. Let me know if you have any suggestions. Either way, if you want more of my content and also support my work, make sure to check out my page at loadsforfootballtalk.com and all my social media channels linked below in the description, as well as on the screen right now. And I'll hope to see/hear from you there. So until then, see you later. Peace!